Once, I believed that I understood the boundaries of my own life. My routines, my hopes, and the subtle equilibrium of the relationships in my household. I considered myself a simple man, guided by love and responsibility. And for the longest time I was convinced that my first wife, Fergus, and I shared not only a home but a bond so strong that even the idea of a second marriage seemed remote, unnecessary, perhaps even unfathomable. Then everything changed, and that change started the night I returned home from the office much later than usual. It was an evening like countless others, except that I had been delayed by an important project at work. My colleagues and I had been working under tight deadlines, so I stayed behind, quite sure that Fergus and my second wife, Sobia, who had come into my life through circumstances I still found puzzling, would both be waiting for me, worried but eager for my company. Typically, when I arrived home, the house was filled with the aroma of dinner, the warmth of shared jokes, and the gentle acceptance of my occasional late returns. This night felt different, but I didn't realize it until much later. Pushing open the front door, I heard quiet noises from the kitchen. The faint rattle of pots suggested that one of my wives, likely Fergus, was preoccupied with some cooking or cleaning. However, I also sensed something else, some intangible tension in the air that I could neither name nor dismiss. Shrugging off the uneasy feeling, I decided to look for Sobia first, perhaps to apologize for coming home so late. She was, after all, newly married to me. She and I had not yet found the perfect rhythm of a life shared together. Each day brought new discoveries and new adjustments. Our home had 3 bedrooms. Fergus and I used the largest one, but ever since my second marriage, Sobia stayed in a slightly smaller room across the hall. The arrangement, ironically, had been orchestrated by Fergus herself. She had insisted that I provide Sobia her own private space, a place to keep her belongings and feel at home. Fergus was not only gracious about my second marriage, she was bizarrely enthusiastic. She had been the one to push for it in the first place. That alone was unusual enough, given that most people I knew regarded a second marriage as a breeding ground for jealousy and conflict. At first I'd balked at the idea. Fergus was my beloved companion of nearly 1 year. Yes, just 1 year of marriage, and she was already encouraging me to marry another woman. Made no sense to me. We were happy, or so I had believed. But Fergus had her reasons, cryptic reasons that only emerged much later. And so, in the end, I relented. If my wife wanted me to marry again, who was I to say no? I loved her enough to at least consider her wishes, even if they baffled me. So it was that I found myself standing in front of Sobia's bedroom door that night, a combination of guilt and curiosity swirling in my stomach. I felt guilty for being late and not calling her to reassure her. I also felt curious because something about the silent house told me that all was not well. Perhaps Sobia was upset with me for not returning her messages. Perhaps she was ill and needed help. Cautiously, I pushed the door open. The room was shrouded in soft, muted light from the bedside lamp. Sobia sat on the edge of the bed, her gaze distant, lost in thought. She did not notice my presence at first. The intensity of her expression, the slight tremble in her shoulders, all made me suspect that she was deeply worried about something. Quietly, I moved closer, intending to gently call out her name. Sobia! But the moment I was near enough to place a hand on her shoulder, she jolted as if electrified. Her eyes went wide, and a stifled scream escaped her lips. Before I could say anything, she scrambled backward until her back was pressed against the headboard, her face stricken with terror. My heart lurched with concern. Sobia, I said softly. It's me. Are you all right? Did I startle you? I'm sorry I came in so quietly. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to calm her trembling, but her eyes remained fearful and her lips quivered. I tried to speak to her, but she responded only with small, incoherent sounds, her mind seemingly trapped in some unseen panic. I wondered if something else had occurred earlier that day. Could someone have threatened her? Was there an intruder in the house? I was about to gently coax her into talking when Fergus, my first wife, rushed in. Her face a tableau of worry. She must have heard the noises and come running. Seeing Sobia trembling and me standing there in confusion, She shot me a suspicious glance, as though to confirm if I'd done something to provoke this reaction. But I was just as clueless, my hands raised in a gesture of helplessness. "What happened here?" she demanded, her voice tinged with alarm. "Did you say anything to her? Did you touch her?" I don't know," I stammered, unable to articulate how baffled I felt. "I only put my hand on her shoulder." She was so startled. "I don't understand why." Fertus's expression softened as she approached Sobia and carefully drew the trembling woman into her arms. There, in the comfort of my first wife's embrace, Sobia burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. I had never seen such raw anguish in someone's eyes before, especially not Sobia's. Only the day before, she had seemed so content, beaming with a youthful excitement every time I walked through the door. She would greet me with a shy but warm smile, sometimes with a playful greeting, sometimes with an elaborate dinner. Our relationship was still new, yes, but it was not fraught with friction, at least not as far as I was aware. Yet now she clung to Fertus as though she were clinging to a lifeline, tears streaming freely down her face. In between sobs, she uttered half-coherent words, but none of us could fully grasp what she was trying to say. Fertus gave me a pointed look, one that seemed to say, "It's best if you leave for a moment." I recognized the wisdom in that glance. If Sobia was in such a heightened emotional state, my presence, especially if she was suddenly afraid of me, might make matters worse. Nodding silently, I left the room, my heart heavy and my mind tangled in questions. I could hear the gentle murmur of Fertus's voice trying to soothe Sobia, perhaps urging her to explain what had frightened her so severely. Unsure of what else to do, I paced the hallway, occasionally pausing to lean against a wall in a futile attempt to calm my own restless thoughts. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 minutes, Fertus emerged and closed the door behind her with quiet firmness. She looked both perturbed and concerned as she faced me. For a moment, the corridor's dim light accentuated the lines of worry etched across her face. "I don't understand," I blurted, running a hand through my hair in exasperation. "Did something happen today while I was at work?" Fertus sighed, shaking her head slowly. "Not that I know of. She's upset, but she's not really explaining. She just keeps saying she's afraid. She doesn't even know what exactly frightened her." A fresh wave of confusion crashed over me. "Do you think someone came to the house? Did she have a phone call from some stranger? Or maybe something from her family?" Fertus shrugged, her expression pensive. "I asked her that, but she didn't say anything about a visitor or a strange call. Right now she's too upset to make sense. Let her calm down. We'll talk about it tomorrow morning." Reluctantly, I agreed. It was late, and perhaps a night's rest would soothe everyone's nerves. Yet a persistent knot of worry gnawed at my stomach, making it hard for me to simply dismiss the incident. That night, I returned to my own bedroom alone. Fertus decided to stay with Sobia to ensure she felt safe. I found myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering what had caused such a drastic change in the woman I had married not so long ago. The next morning, I awoke to the smell of breakfast cooking. My mood lightened slightly, thinking that maybe Sobia was feeling better. Getting ready for work, I went into the kitchen, expecting the usual bustle. To my surprise, only Fertus was there. She was preparing parathas and chai. The lines of anxiety around her eyes told me she hadn't slept well. "How is she?" I asked quietly, glancing around. "She's calmer," Fertus replied, though her voice was subdued. "But she didn't want to come out yet. She said she needed some time." I nodded, my concern deepening. But I let it be. If Sobia needed space, I would give her that. Over breakfast, Fertus and I exchanged worried looks but spoke little. As soon as I finished my meal, I left for work, my head awash in thoughts. The day passed in a blur. My concentration wavered, and my colleagues noticed my distraction. I managed to get through the day, but my mind was fixed on my household's sudden turmoil. When evening came, I hastened home. This time, I arrived at a more reasonable hour, hoping to find Sobia in better spirits. I was greeted by a quiet house once more. However, the tension in the air had diminished slightly. I found Sobia in the living room, flipping through channels on the TV with an almost mechanical air. She did look up when I entered, and I tried to give her a reassuring smile. "Hello," I said gently. "How was your day?" She paused, eyes flicking from me to the TV and then back again. "Fine," she murmured. Though the fear I had seen last night was no longer etched into her features, she seemed distant. Cautiously, I sat down beside her on the couch, leaving some space between us. "Listen," I began, hoping my voice conveyed kindness and concern. "I'm really sorry about last night. I never meant to scare you. If there's something that happened or something that's bothering you, I'd like to help." She glanced down at her hands, fiddling with the edge of her dupatta. For a moment, I thought she was about to confide in me, but all she did was sigh. "I'm not sure what happened to me," she said in a near whisper. "I just felt so terrified. But I can't remember why." Her words confused me further, but I didn't press. Instead, I suggested we have dinner together, hoping that a shared meal might ease the awkwardness that hung between us. She nodded, and soon Fergus joined us. The meal was subdued, but at least it was civil. I couldn't ignore the feeling that both women were keeping something from me. Fergus seemed concerned about Sobia, yet also kept giving me searching looks, as if I were the missing piece in a puzzle she was trying to complete. That night, after we finished eating, Sobia went to her room. I lingered in the living room, flipping through the day's news on my phone, waiting for Fergus to finish cleaning up. When she was done, she approached me quietly. "I want to stay with Sobia again tonight," she announced matter-of-factly. "I think she still feels a little uneasy." I wanted to protest, to tell her that I missed her company, but the concern in her eyes stopped me. Without argument, I nodded. "Sure," I said softly. "Whatever makes her feel safe." Fergus left, and I settled into our bedroom, alone for a second consecutive night. My sleep was restless, punctuated by strange dreams I could never fully remember upon waking. Somewhere in that half-awake realm, I pictured Sobia's terrified face, the flickering shadows on the walls, and a sense of foreboding that gnawed at me. Little did I know that these unnerving incidents were only the start of a far deeper mystery. It was as if a silent, invisible storm was gathering, ready to unleash chaos on our home. Soon enough, events would take an even more bewildering turn. Few days passed. Sobia seemed to recover from her inexplicable anxiety, gradually smiling more often and even initiating conversation with me in the mornings. But beneath her tentative smiles lay a fragility that put me on constant alert. I tried to be gentle, to tread lightly around any topic that might upset her. Meanwhile, Fergus was supportive, as she had always been. She seemed to sense my unasked questions but never broached them directly. It was as though she carried a secret she was unsure how to reveal. One evening after dinner, I retreated to my bedroom earlier than usual, drained by a grueling day at work. Sobia remained in the living room, reading a book, while Fergus cleaned up in the kitchen. I wanted nothing more than to lie down and drift into a peaceful sleep. The tension that had invaded our household had worn me thin. However, just as I began to doze off, the door creaked open, and I looked up to see Fergus standing there, her expression indecipherable. She held a glass of warm milk. I sat up, wondering if something was wrong. "Everything okay?" I asked, stifling a yawn. She nodded and offered me the glass. "I thought you might like this," she said softly. Then, hesitating, she added, "There's something else." I raised an eyebrow. "Yes. Sobia and I," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "We wanted to ask if it would be all right if we all slept in this room tonight." For a moment, I thought I was too tired to have heard her correctly. All three of us. The proposition was highly unusual. The idea might cross one's mind in certain contexts, but it was not how our family dynamic usually operated. Both wives had separate sleeping arrangements, and never before had we all shared the same space. Yet Fergus pressed on. "Sobia has had nightmares," she explained. "She's feeling uneasy again. I offered to sleep here with her so that she feels safer." But she doesn't want you to be left out, so she suggested we all share the room. If that's uncomfortable for you, you can say so. I opened my mouth to speak but found myself lacking words. Was it truly Sobia's idea? Few days ago, she had flinched at my touch, and now she wanted us to sleep side by side. The abrupt shift in her demeanor raised my suspicions, but a part of me felt relieved that she no longer seemed afraid of me. Ultimately, I nodded. If that's what makes her feel better, fine. I have no objection. A small smile of gratitude tugged at the corners of Fertus's mouth. She set the glass down on the nightstand and left. I took a few sips of the milk, hoping it would soothe the persistent knot in my stomach. Soon, the two women entered the room, Sobia carrying a small pillow and a thin blanket. She avoided my gaze, focusing on arranging her sleeping space. Fertus placed herself on the sofa, motioning for me and Sobia to use the bed. The arrangement was awkward at first. I felt like an intruder in my own bedroom, uncertain of where to position myself. Sobia appeared equally uneasy. Yet Fertus remained calm, even motherly, encouraging Sobia that everything was all right. Eventually we managed to settle down. I lay on the far side of the bed, Sobia next to me, and Fertus on the couch. A hush fell over the room. My thoughts spiraled. Why had Sobia changed her mind? Why did Fertus insist on orchestrating such scenarios? Why did it feel like I was living in someone else's dream? Sometime after midnight, I was roused by hushed voices. It took me a moment to realize it was the whispering of my wives. Curious, I remained still, my eyes closed, trying to catch fragments of what they were saying. Is he asleep? Sobia's voice, barely audible. I think so, Fertus responded in an equally muted tone. We should do it now. My heart thudded. Do what now? My thoughts raced. Could they be planning some surprise for me? That seemed unlikely. The tension in Fertus's voice sounded more urgent, less playful. Slowly, I cracked my eyes open just enough to see silhouettes moving in the dim glow of the night lamp. Fertus disappeared from the room for a minute, then returned with something in her hand, an object that looked odd and unfamiliar in the faint light. Sobia looked frightened, but Fertus whispered soothingly, "Don't worry. Just follow my lead." Alarmed by this cryptic display, I decided to feign sleep, hoping to see what they intended. My mind conjured up all sorts of wild scenarios, including the idea that they might be plotting to harm me. The memory of Sobia's unexplained terror returned, causing a chill to run down my spine. Then, slowly, Fertus approached the bed. In the hush of the room, I felt her shadow near me, and I could sense her hesitation. If they were planning something nefarious, was I actually in danger? Summoning my courage, I rolled over and sat up abruptly, seizing her wrist. The object in her hand was some kind of herbal root or plant, tied with a red thread. "Fertus, what is this?" I demanded, blinking to clear the haze of sleep. She stiffened, eyes wide, as if caught in a transgression. It's just a remedy," she stammered, pulling back. "A herbal treatment for stomach pain." You have stomach pain, so you bring it here in the middle of the night." My voice was sharper than I intended. Sobia squeaked in alarm, pressing herself against the headboard, clearly startled by the confrontation. Fertus swallowed. "I didn't mean to scare you. I was told by a hakim that if I keep it nearby while sleeping, it helps." Her explanation fell flat. If it was truly for her benefit, why was she standing beside me rather than her chosen spot on the couch? And why the secrecy? "I don't understand," I muttered, letting go of her wrist. My mind flashed to Sobia's bruised face from the other day, her terror, the hush-hush atmosphere in the house. Something was awry and I was not getting answers. Clearly rattled, Fertus tucked the herb behind her back. "It's nothing. Sorry. I should have told you." Without waiting for my response, she retreated across the room, motioning for Sobia to remain calm. Then, in a rush, she left the room entirely, leaving me with a swirl of suspicion and confusion. Sobia stared at me, her cheeks pale. I offered a comforting gesture, But she slid off the bed and followed Fergus out. For several minutes I simply sat there stunned. The questions mounted. Why had Fergus insisted on my second marriage if she was going to behave so strangely? What was the significance of that herbal object? And what was Sobia truly afraid of? My mind reeled, conjuring scenarios of black magic, secret pacts, or sinister rituals. I shook my head at the absurdity of it. Fergus was not superstitious. She was educated, practical, and had never shown any inclination toward bizarre remedies. Also, it made no sense that she would harm me or Sobia. She had insisted on the wedding to Sobia, had welcomed her warmly, had never expressed jealousy. Could it be that she was performing some protective ritual she was too embarrassed to explain? Nothing made sense. Exhaustion weighed on me, and eventually I lay down again, though it took me a long time to return to sleep. When morning came, Fergus was nowhere to be found in the bedroom. Later, I discovered her in the kitchen, as though nothing had happened. She made breakfast, her smile subdued yet polite. I broached the topic, but she deftly changed the subject, focusing on mundane household tasks. Sobia avoided me altogether, which only magnified my unease. The days that followed became even stranger, weaving an unsettling pattern of questions with no answers. At my office, I struggled to focus on work. My colleagues noticed how preoccupied I was. Each time I glanced at the clock, I wondered what might be unfolding at home. Was Fergus still carrying around that mysterious herb? Was Sobia locked in her room, haunted by unknown fears? By the time a full week had passed since that odd midnight encounter, I decided I had to confront the situation head-on. My anxiety was growing. I found myself snapping at coworkers, losing my appetite and suffering sleepless nights. When at home, Sobia often seemed distant and moody, while Fergus's once open affection now felt guarded, as though she were always on the verge of revealing some great secret but could not bring herself to do so. Eventually, the tension reached a breaking point. One evening after dinner, I asked both women to join me in the living room. We sat on the couch, an unspoken heaviness settling over us. Fergus perched near one end, her posture upright and defensive. Sobia sat near the other end, arms crossed over her stomach, her eyes flickering with apprehension. I positioned myself in the middle, facing them. "We need to talk," I began, my voice calm but firm. "I can't keep living like this, tiptoeing around each other, unsure of what's happening in our own home. I love both of you. I married you both with the best intentions. I want us to be a family. But something is wrong, and I need to understand what it is." Fergus glanced at Sobia, her eyes flashing a silent message. But Sobia seemed too distraught to pick it up, or perhaps she deliberately ignored it. She merely bowed her head. I took that as a sign that Fergus would speak first. Clearing her throat, my first wife began slowly. I know how this looks. You think I've been hiding things. And you're right in a way. But please believe me when I say I'm doing it only because I love you. How can secrecy be a form of love? I countered, struggling to keep my frustration in check. Explain it to me because I'm confused. She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm trying to protect you, she said, voice trembling. Sometimes we do desperate things for those we love. But it's complicated. Her gaze drifted to Sobia. Maybe we should. I don't want to talk about it, Sobia interrupted abruptly, her tone surprisingly cold. She rose from the couch, hugging her arms. I'm sorry, but I can't. Not yet. Before I could press her further, she walked briskly to her room. The sound of her door shutting echoed through the hallway, leaving Fergus and me to stare at one another in strained silence. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache forming. Fergus reached out to place a tentative hand on my arm, but I pulled away reflexively, not out of anger but out of sheer exhaustion. It's late, I finally said. I'm going to bed. I guess we'll figure this out tomorrow. Yet the next day brought no clarity. The hush in the house continued. Sobia avoided me whenever possible, and Fergus appeared torn between comforting her and reassuring me. This went on for several more days, an agonizing stalemate. I couldn't force them to speak, nor could I ignore that something was destroying the peace of our home. Then, unexpectedly, the crisis took a dangerous turn. It happened on a night much like the others. We had finished dinner with minimal conversation. Fergus had retired to her own bedroom, insisting she was tired. Sobia, however, lingered in the living room, reading a magazine. I, feeling the weight of the day, went to my bedroom and tried to sleep. Hours later, I jolted awake to the sound of a piercing scream. Heart pounding, I leaped out of bed, flung open the door, and rushed toward the source of the scream, Sobia's bedroom. The sight that greeted me froze my blood. She lay on the bed, curled into a fetal position. Her face streaked with tears, and large dark bruises marred her arms. Her lip was split, a trickle of blood staining the white sheets. She sobbed, her eyes darting wildly around the room as though searching for an assailant. Yet the door had been locked from the inside, and there was no sign of forced entry. Fergus arrived seconds later, a look of horror twisting her features. She rushed to Sobia's side, trying to calm her, but Sobia shrank from her touch, trembling. I was momentarily rooted to the spot, unable to comprehend how Sobia had sustained such injuries while locked in her own bedroom. It was as if some malevolent force had materialized, harmed her, and vanished without a trace. "Call an ambulance," Fergus urged, snapping me out of my paralysis. I fumbled for my phone, dialed emergency services, and managed to convey the situation through choked words. Within half an hour, paramedics arrived. They examined Sobia and questioned us about what had happened. Neither Fergus nor I could offer any logical explanation. The paramedics exchanged worried glances, possibly suspecting domestic abuse. Their suspicion was understandable, but it left me feeling both enraged and helpless. Sobia was whisked away to the hospital. Fergus and I followed in our car, hearts pounding and minds swirling with dread. In the waiting area, I paced, replaying every detail of the past few weeks, trying to piece together the puzzle. Could Sobia have harmed herself? That seemed unthinkable, especially given the pattern of her injuries. Could it be something supernatural? The rational part of me dismissed that possibility as soon as I considered it. Eventually, a doctor approached us. Her face was solemn, and her voice carried the gentle tone medical professionals often use in dire circumstances. "She's stable," the doctor said, "but she's been severely beaten. Whoever did this used significant force." My mouth went dry. "But the room was locked from the inside," I protested, even as I realized how far-fetched my words sounded. The doctor's eyes flicked between Fergus and me. "We see situations like this sometimes," she said carefully. "Often, the victim is too afraid to name the abuser. If you know anything..." I cut her off, my voice trembling with indignation. "No one else was in that room. I swear." She studied me for a moment, likely measuring my sincerity before nodding. "Well, we need to keep her under observation. She's traumatized. She might benefit from speaking with a counselor. In the meantime, we'll manage her pain and ensure there's no internal bleeding." I thanked her and sank into one of the plastic chairs, covering my face with my hands. This was too much to handle. Even more perplexing was Fergus's reaction. She didn't appear shocked in the way I would have expected. Instead, she seemed furious, and that fury was directed at me. Her eyes blazed when she finally turned to me, as though I bore some unspoken blame. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I had nothing to do with this." She crossed her arms, speaking in a barely controlled whisper. "How can you say that when you're the only..." I stepped back, stunned. "You think I did this to her? Fergus, have you lost your mind?" Her anger softened into sorrow. Lowering her gaze, she muttered, "I don't know what to think anymore." With that cryptic remark, she turned away, leaving me reeling. Over the next several days, Sobia remained hospitalized. Her bruises and cuts, though not life-threatening, were extensive. She refused to see me, flinching whenever I entered the room. Fergus was her constant companion, rarely leaving her bedside. I would come by daily, hoping to offer some comfort or at least discover the truth, but Sobia would turn her face away, and Fergus would stand guard, her expression a warning for me to keep my distance. Finally, the day came when Sobia was discharged. I offered to drive her home, but Fergus informed me tersely that Sobia wanted to go to her parents' place instead. Just for a while, Fergus added, though she didn't sound convinced. Concern and heartbreak gnawed at me. My second wife was effectively fleeing our home, and I had no idea how to stop her. "What are you not telling me?" I implored, catching Fergus by the arm as she prepared to leave the hospital with Sobia. "If you suspect something, if you think I harmed her, at least talk to me." Her eyes welled up. She glanced at Sobia, who was waiting in a wheelchair near the hospital's exit, arms wrapped protectively around herself. Then, leaning in, she whispered, "I'm sorry. Can't." Promised her. "We need some time." With that, she pushed the wheelchair forward, and I watched them disappear into the afternoon sunlight. My heart felt like it had been wrenched from my chest. I stood there, in the sterile hospital corridor, staring at the space where they had been. My mind buzzed with unanswered questions. Why did Sobia look so terrified whenever she saw me? Why was Fergus acting like I was some sort of villain? And who on earth had beaten Sobia in a locked room? Life after Sobia's departure was lonely and tense. It was as though someone had torn a vital thread out of the tapestry of our household, leaving jagged edges behind. Fergus moved about the house mechanically, cooking meals, tidying up, but barely speaking to me. Every attempt I made at conversation ended in awkward silence. At night, I would lie awake, haunted by the memory of Sobia's terror. I was certain I had not harmed her, but a nagging voice in my mind whispered, "What if you did something in your sleep? What if you don't remember?" The thought was horrifying, yet I couldn't dismiss it entirely. Hadn't there been nights when I woke up exhausted, as though I had been wrestling with shadows in my dreams? The bleak routine was shattered one afternoon when a summons from the family court arrived. My blood ran cold as I read the document. Sobia had filed for Kula, a form of divorce, effectively. She sought to end the marriage on grounds of personal safety and irreconcilable differences. My hands shook with disbelief. We had been married only a few months. I had not expected everything to collapse so soon. That evening, I confronted Fergus with the document, the official seal of the court glaring at me like an accusation. "Did you know about this?" I demanded. She looked at it, her shoulders slumping, and nodded. "She told me she was going to do it," Fergus admitted softly. "She can't live with you, not after everything." Desperation seized me. "But I don't even know what everything is. What does she think I did? And do you believe her? Or do you think I'm guilty as well?" Fergus hesitated. For a moment, I thought she would slip back into the same vague evasions, but then she surprised me. She took a deep breath as though steeling herself and said, "Sit down. There's a lot I need to tell you." With my emotions in turmoil, I sank onto the couch. Fergus sat next to me, folding her hands in her lap. Her voice wavered at first, but then she began speaking in a steady, determined tone. "I've known for a while that something changes in you when you're asleep. You're not crazy, please don't think that. But you do have a condition. I noticed it early in our marriage, the way you'd thrash about in bed, sometimes talking in your sleep, sometimes even striking out. That's why I started sleeping in the other room occasionally, telling you it was because I was restless. I was afraid of what you might do while you were unconscious." My mouth went dry. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, already sensing the answer. She looked at her hands. "I was scared you wouldn't believe me, or that it would hurt your pride. The times you injured me were minor, a few scratches, some bruises. I convinced myself it wasn't that serious. But I worried it might get worse. Then I thought, what if he's just stressed? Maybe it'll pass." But it didn't pass. I felt as though my world was spinning. The memories flooded back. Moments when I'd woken up with no recollection of how my arms or legs ended up in a certain position, or how the sheets got torn. I had chalked it up to restless dreams. Furtis continued, her eyes brimming with tears. I started looking for solutions. I talked to a doctor anonymously. He mentioned that some patients with parasomnia or sleep disorders could lash out physically. He suggested therapy or medication. Then I heard from an acquaintance about a hakim who gave me some herbal remedies. I was desperate. I didn't want to see you suffer, and I was scared to push you into official medical treatments you might resist. So I tried the herbs. A wave of guilt and relief surged through me. At least it wasn't something truly malevolent, like an affair or a vendetta. But still. And what about the second marriage? Why push me into that? Furtis's cheeks flushed. It was stupid, I know. But I told the doctor about how lonely I was, how I was the only one dealing with this, how you'd get stressed at me if I tried to bring it up. He made some offhand remark that sometimes a new dynamic or a big change could snap someone out of certain mental patterns. I latched onto that. I also thought having another woman around might share the burden. I convinced myself that if you had Sobia's presence too, the combined love would help you. It was irrational, but I truly believed I was doing it for you. My chest tightened and my eyes burned with tears. I covered my face with both hands. I can't believe this, I said thickly. I hurt you without knowing it. I hurt Sobia. And you thought a second marriage would cure me. She nodded miserably. I didn't think you'd ever hurt her. I guess I hoped. Oh, I don't know what I hoped. I just wanted you to get better. But instead it got worse. You must have had another episode in Sobia's room. She woke up, tried to fight you off, locked the door in terror. When I heard her screams, I realized it had happened again. But I was too late. A nauseating swirl of remorse, shame, and horror churned in my stomach. I recalled all the times Sobia had looked at me with dread. She must have recognized that something was off in my behavior, particularly at night. No wonder she was terrified. She had no clue why her husband would suddenly become a stranger, violent and cruel. Furtis squeezed my arm gently. We can fix this, she said, her voice soft. I've researched it more. There are treatments, medications, therapy, and strategies to ensure you don't harm yourself or anyone else while sleeping. It's not too late. And Sobia? Asked, voice raw with emotion. Will she come back if she knows I'm getting help? Furtis shook her head, sorrow evident in her expression. I don't think so. She's too traumatized. She truly believes she's in danger around you. For her own peace of mind, she wants out. The tears that had been building in me finally spilled over. I crumpled onto the couch, shoulders shaking. Furtis placed a hand on my back, rubbing gentle circles as I wept. In that moment, I realized the depth of her devotion. Despite everything she had suffered, she was still here, determined to help me. When my tears subsided, she whispered, the question now is, are you willing to accept this to seek treatment? Because if you don't, I can't stay either. I love you, but I can't keep risking my life or yours. In that instant, I made my decision. I'll do whatever it takes, I promised. Therapy, medication, anything. I just want to be normal, to stop hurting the people I love. I never want to see that look of fear in your eyes, or Sobia's again. Furtis nodded, relief washing over her features. She placed a tender kiss on my forehead. We'll get through this, she murmured. We'll find a way. A path to healing. The next few months were a grueling journey of diagnosis, therapy sessions, and medical evaluations. I visited a psychiatrist who specialized in sleep disorders. After a series of interviews, tests, and overnight observations at a sleep clinic, I was diagnosed with a type of REM sleep behavior disorder. My body was acting out vivid and often violent dreams. The doctor explained that it was treatable through medication, better sleep hygiene, and therapy to manage stress. Simultaneously, I went through the legal proceedings regarding Sobia's Kula. Part of me wanted to beg her to give me another chance, to wait until my treatment took effect, but the bigger part recognized that she had endured real trauma. Dragging her back into that environment might only harm her further. I signed the divorce papers with a heavy heart, letting her go. When the proceedings were finalized, I felt a sense of sorrow and acceptance. I could hardly blame her for wanting to be free of the nightmares associated with me. Fergus was my rock throughout this period. She attended therapy sessions with me, spoke to my doctors, and learned about the ways to ensure our bedroom was a safe space. We removed sharp objects, placed cushions around the bed, and she insisted I wear specialized wrist guards to prevent me from unintentionally scratching or hitting. On nights when I experienced intense episodes, she held me, speaking calmly until I settled back into sleep. Gradually, the violent episodes decreased. My medication was adjusted until it found the right balance. Therapy helped me confront the underlying stresses I'd been ignoring. I learned to identify triggers, to adopt techniques that reduced nighttime disruptions, like avoiding heavy meals or caffeine late in the evening. I also kept a journal of my dreams, which, while disturbing at times, helped me gain insight into the nightmares fueling my nocturnal violence. As I improved, Fergus and I found a renewed sense of closeness. It felt like we were building our marriage anew, this time with honesty and mutual support. Gone were the days of secrets and unspoken fears. Every milestone in my progress felt like a victory for both of us. In time, Allah blessed us with children, twin boys who brought joy and laughter into our once troubled home. Caring for them tested our patience and energy, but it also filled each day with purpose. Often, after tucking the boys into their cribs, I would gaze at them, overwhelmed by gratitude. The thought of having harmed them if my condition had gone untreated sent shivers down my spine. Fergus must have felt the same relief. We both knew how close we had come to disaster. One evening, as we stood by the crib watching our twins sleep, I embraced Fergus from behind. She leaned into me and I whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me, for fighting for me, even when I was too blind to see the truth." She turned, her eyes filled with tears of happiness. "I did it because I love you," she said simply. "And I knew the man you are by day is not the same one who haunted your dreams." My throat tightened with emotion. "I'm just sorry about," she pressed a finger to my lips. "Don't apologize anymore. We've left the past behind. Sobia has her life free from fear. We have ours filled with promise." Her voice caught. "That's enough." I nodded, kissing her forehead. She was right. The best atonement for the pain I had caused was to move forward with compassion, to be the husband and father they deserved, and to never let the shadows of my disorder rule me again. Reflection and hope. Looking back on that turbulent chapter of my life, I realize how many people live with hidden afflictions. Mental health struggles, sleep disorders, or internal battles that remain invisible during daylight. Some might even harm themselves or their loved ones unintentionally. Society tends to judge such individuals harshly, labeling them as abusive or broken without ever acknowledging the possibility of underlying conditions. In my case, I was fortunate enough to have a wife who risked her own safety to uncover the truth. She endured fear, confusion, and heartbreak, all in the hope that I could be healed. Though I lost my second marriage in the process, and though the manner in which Fergus sought a solution was misguided, her intentions were born of love. I never heard from Sobia again. After the divorce, she quietly returned to her hometown, presumably to start over. Sometimes I wished I could have apologized to her, explained that the violence she experienced did not reflect my conscious will. But perhaps the kindest thing I could do was to grant her the freedom she sought. She deserved a life untainted by fear, to heal and possibly find a future where trust could blossom again. As for me, I learned that vulnerability is not a weakness but a doorway to understanding. Once I faced my condition head-on, I discovered a wellspring of resilience within me. Therapy helped me not only manage my sleep disorder but also refine my communication skills, my empathy, and my appreciation for every moment of peace. The presence of my twin sons, each day, reminded me of the preciousness of stability and the need for constant vigilance. Life is far from perfect, of course. Even with medication, I sometimes have mild relapses. If I'm overly stressed or if I forget a dose, I might experience a restless night. But Fergus and I have developed a routine to deal with it. We talk openly, never letting shame or guilt silence us. We're also considering building a safe sleeping arrangement for me, like a bed with padded walls, for worst-case scenarios. Love, after all, can coexist with practicality. Our relationship is testimony to that. Sometimes I remember how people often say, a man's biggest enemy is his own mind. In my case, it was literally true. The battle between my conscious self, gentle, caring, and my unconscious self, violent, unpredictable, shaped the darkest days of my life. But the outcome wasn't determined by raw strength or self-denial. It was decided by willingness to seek help, to trust loved ones, and to find the courage to confront the unknown. From time to time, I share my story with close friends who might be going through unexplained difficulties. Sleepless nights, inexplicable bruises, or a spouse's nighttime episodes. I urge them to seek medical advice. Don't hide from it, I say. If you truly love someone, help them find the root cause. Don't assume they're just cruel or cursed. Sometimes it's an illness, and it can be treated. Ferda stands by my side, gently correcting me when I slip into old habits of self-blame. You're not a monster, she reminds me, her voice firm yet kind. You're a person who had a problem, and you found a solution. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. Her words have become my anchor. I've learned that the path to healing is not about denying mistakes but embracing responsibility. Yes, I am responsible for the harm I caused, even if I wasn't conscious of my actions. And I'm also responsible for the steps I've taken to ensure it never happens again. This dual sense of accountability and empowerment sets me free from the prisons of guilt and denial. Now our home is filled with laughter, our boys chasing each other with toy cars, squealing with delight. On weekends, we all gather for a simple outing to the park or a restaurant. Sometimes, as I watch Fergus help one of the twins tie his shoelaces or feed him bites of fruit, I marvel at how life has changed. The nightmares that once threatened to destroy our family have been reduced to a manageable shadow, pushed into the background of a brighter, healthier existence. If someone were to ask me, was it worth it? I would say yes, wholeheartedly, because facing the truth about myself, no matter how horrifying, allowed me to protect the ones I love. Ignorance would have led to more suffering, possibly irreparable. Knowledge, therapy, and a support system paved the way for a future where my children can grow up safe, and my wife and I can share genuine intimacy without fear. In the end, the story that began with confusion and terror evolved into one of perseverance and hope. Through twists and turns, heartbreak and healing, we discovered that what truly matters is the resolve to stand by each other in times of crisis. Not every day is easy, but every day is worth living. And if someone told me this outcome was impossible when Sobia first ran from me in fear, I would have believed them. I would have called it a miracle. Now, I realize it's not so much a miracle as it is the direct result of empathy, determination, and the willingness to keep trying. A single conversation, a single moment of honesty, can alter the course of many lives. Fertus's decision to finally confide in me about my condition changed everything. It still stings to recall how we lost Sobia in the process. But if my story can reach others, perhaps it could spare them that pain. Maybe they can catch their own or a loved one's condition sooner, before it escalates to violence and broken trust. Maybe they can salvage what we lost. For me, the best I can do is move forward, ever vigilant, ever grateful. I look at my wife, my first and only wife now, and see a survivor, a nurturer, a guardian angel who refused to abandon me even when the darkness in my own mind threatened to tear us apart. Our journey stands as a testament to what love can endure, and how it can triumph if given the chance.